Tech Talk with Matthew Dickerson. Matthew Dickerson. Tech Talk. Sit back and relax. It's time to talk technology.
Hello, masters and apprentices, mentors and proteges alike. Are you ready to solve some of the really big, pressing problems of the world? Well, grab your thinking caps and find yourself a comfy seat, because it's time for Tech Talk with Matthew Dickerson. And here, to stir the creative juices of our collective minds, he's got his thinking cap perched on his head with a thoughtful little tilt on it. It's Matthew Dickerson, back fresh from his globe-trotting antics. Welcome back to headquarters, Matt.
Thank you. Good to see you in the flesh again. It's always a bit nicer doing it person to person rather than
a lot easier
over the phone wherever we might be. So it was nice. But I did enjoy my trip. We talked last time, I think, about toilets in South Korea. This time
we had a lot of conversation about toilets.
That's right. I did manage to make it to the Japanese Grand Prix at Suzuka.
How are the toilets?
Well, I didn't visit the toilets there because they had lineups very long, so I thought I'd just hold on for a bit there. I'm sure they wouldn't have been as flash as the toilets in South Korea, but it is just wonderful being around the technology that's there. Of course, they don't let me into the pits and play with the cars there. You just know all the, I know, silly of them. I know all the little minor developments that are changing and just the wind tunnel testing. I just love the idea of Formula One in terms of refinement. But probably the highlight for me, or two highlights actually, if I can have two highlights. One was the full-sized Lego car to represent one of the Formula One cars. Thousands of hours spent in designing, thousands of hours spent in building, and you look at it, and it is. I've stood beside Formula One cars, I've stood beside this Lego car, and it's full size, and as far as Lego is concerned, pretty cool. And I think it'd be really good on the racetrack because they do crash, it'll just fall apart, and they can just get the guy there and put it back together
again. What gets me about Formula One is that, was it 20 years ago or more, that where they were becoming so powerful, they had to put limits on how much power these things could have. So the art became in designing, every other component of these cars to go faster without the extra power out of the motor. Is that right?
Well, they were getting stupidly fast, and that became dangerous.
Because
you're going faster than an aeroplane at some parts there. And in fact, they talk about the amount of downforce created by the wings on the car itself. If they were going through the Monaco tunnel, for example, and they went upside down, there's enough force there that would actually hold the car up against the ceiling of the tunnel. So there's an incredible amount of downforce. I don't know that it was 20 years ago per se. I don't know my Formula history. That's right. Sounds good.
Sorry, folks.
But I know they've always had limitations in terms of you can only have an engine of this size. They had the turbo era for a stage there, I remember. But there was always a limit on the size of the engine, always a limit on whether it's turbo or non-turbo. Now they've got some regenerative power. They've got some hybrid power that they're using in the Formula One cars. But again, they've got to put limits on them. And I want to say that when the turbo era is around, the engines might have only been, say, 2.5 litre. And you think, well, that's a pretty small engine. You see a lot of engines a lot bigger than that, and they went really fast. But these things are so finely tuned, and they rev to incredible revolutions per minute, not your average family car driving around. But then you're right. It seems to me now that the engines are all very similar, and it just comes down to the wind tunnel, the time you get in your wind tunnel.
Every other thing you can do.
That's right. And they'll bring enhancements where they'll just be, we've just changed the shape of this particular front wing just for this particular track, for the characteristics of the track. And the DRS, when they introduce the DRS, so when they open up the back wing, that alone probably adds 10 kilometres an hour or more down the main straight. So just changing the aerodynamics to that level. So literally you've got a back wing for downforce down the main straight. You don't want that, so open it up, called DRS, and that adds at least 10 kilometres an hour to the outright speed of the car during that. So all these little enhancements, and you just realise just how important wind resistance is. As we know, double speed, quadruple air resistance when you get to speeds of 320 odd kilometres an hour. Good fun. But the other thing is the other highlight of mine, 102,000 people there on the Sunday for the race. I only went to the one day. And leaving the circuit at the end of the race, not a scrap of rubbish on the ground, not a mess anywhere. And you saw Japanese people walking along holding their rubbish in their hands, and there were bins at various locations, but they would prefer to walk out of the circuit holding the rubbish rather than put it on the ground somewhere. And I've been to the Melbourne Grand Prix a number of times. I've been to the Adelaide Grand Prix when it was around.
Where you were slowed down from your exit because you had to climb through the rubbish.
Just about. You could just forge your way through the rubbish on the ground. So it's just a very nice thing of Japanese culture. So that was a bit of a highlight as well as what's happening on the racetrack.
Very, very interesting. Well, Today on Tech Talk, we're looking at how Bentley is making the road a safer place for everyone. We have some bad news for people who fancy their paper airplane making skills. And get out your tinfoil hats, folks. The Thought Police are here, thanks to the modern wonders of AI. But enough of this stalling for time. Let's get cracking into the stories. Now, remember dial-up internet? There was a major leap in communication. Once you'd negotiated who had control of the phone line in your house, well, then you had to wait for the modem to work its noisy magic, and then you could send your messages and get emails and download stuff literally in minutes. We have certainly come a long way since then, and thank the fibre optic gods for that too. Since those early days, the challenge has been to get faster and faster communications, and Matt, the new record in 2024 is something to behold. What have they done?
They've done something incredible, but first of all, I want to go back for listeners that are a bit younger and just do the dial-up modem. I reckon you could probably do a dial-up modem sound, couldn't you? To me, it's kind of like
the whistles and the words.
That's right. It was like a beep. It was kind of a
bing, bing, bing.
all that noise. Yeah. And I remember back to the day when you used to actually connect something physical to a phone to actually have sounds go down the phone, and then of course we got modems.
Yeah, you had to take off the receiver and place it into a special adapter.
Right. Yeah, they're the ones.
Yeah.
So things have changed since then.
But I mean, I remember also thinking, wow, we are in the future. This is amazing that I can just type stuff here and it'll come out there.
That's right. Well, even faxes were a bit like that, weren't they? And they made the same sort of noises.
Yeah.
And then sending a piece of paper with writing on it, and someone at the other end got the piece of paper with writing on it. It's almost like it reconstructed it. But it was around that time. It was the mid-90s, and I'd already been involved. I had a business I started, and I'd already been involved with technology. So I was attending a technology conference back in the mid-90s. And at that stage, this internet thing was all pretty brand new. And we'd gotten up to a speed of 33.6 kilobits per second with the latest and greatest modems. And at this conference, they were talking about speeds and what we could do with this wonderful new speed. And I spoke to one of the
33,000 bits.
That's it, kilobits, not bytes, even bits we're talking about, So I spoke to this particular presenter, and he told me with great detail the reason that 33.6 kilobits per second was it. As far as copper cabling was concerned, two pieces of copper that we've been using for phone lines for some time, that was it. And the only way we could go fast was by basically replacing all the copper we had laid around the nation, around the world, with other better things to be able to get better speeds. And I thought, wow, that's pretty impressive that this guy knows so much, and 33.6 is it. Oh, well, I wonder what we're going to do next. When are we going to lay new cabling, all the rest of it? And then in 1998, everything that guy told me seemed to go out the window because we got a new modem that was 56 kilobits per second. So according to this guy, 33.6 was it. 56, probably two-thirds faster. Wow, with that same copper cabling. And I went, wow, well, this has got to be it now. 56 kilobits per second has got to be it. A couple of years later, we had ADSL come along. We got to 20 megabits per second with ADSL, and then even faster speeds after that. So when we think we're at a maximum, and in technology, it's a very dangerous thing to say, that's it. Yes. We can't go any further now. That's as far as you're going to go. It seems a bit laughable that one person who was an expert in their field and presenting at a conference who told me 33.6 was it, you go 600 times faster within the space of a few years. So let's jump forward to today now. Let's jump forward 20-odd years, and we've got fibre optic cabling. Now, we know we've got lots of fibre optic cabling running under the oceans, connecting various countries together, running around in countries. We know we've got fibre optic cable with NBN, and there are speed limitations on that, and you obviously have to have some sort of speed limitation eventually. There's some researchers now at UK's Aston University that have just said, we've broken the self-proclaimed speed record. So they're claiming it as a record, but no one's really debating at this stage. But they're on one single fibre optic cable doing 301 terabits per second. So
I'm just doing, so gigabits is billion, tera is trillion.
Well, we started talking about kilobits in the beginning of this at 33.6. Then we jumped to megabits when we got to ADSL. Then forget about giga, we're jumping straight to tera. So 301 terabits per second. Now, we know fibre optic cabling is fast anyway. And to be fair, some Japanese researchers a few years ago claimed a record of 319 terabits per second. But to do that, they had to design a new type of fibre optic cable. What I love about this particular story is that the researchers have hit 301 terabits per second using existing fibre optic cabling. Now, we have got, I have no idea, but we have got a lot of fibre optic cabling running around the world in each country, connecting countries. And if you had to relay all that to get your 319 terabits per second, that's a big job, obviously, a lot of infrastructure. But to be able to use the existing copper cabling, that's pretty exciting. Now,
So we've got to be able to teleport someone by now.
Surely.
Yeah.
301 terabits per second. I reckon you could Pac-Man into a few terabits, surely. So they've been able to achieve this by using the E and S bands. And I'll get to the bands in a moment. Normally, fibre optic cable relies on C and L bands. Now, there's not a lot of logic, although there is some in the way they name the band. You'd think there might be A, B, C, D, E, F, or something that was sequential.
Yeah, no.
But there are essentially 6 bands that are typically used with fibre optic cables, and these are all infrared parts of the spectrum. So the O band stands for original band, and it's got 1260 to 1360 nanometers. So that's kind of where they started off with fibre optic cabling. Then they went to the E band for extended band, and that went to from 1360 to 1460, so that was a bit better. And then the S band is short wavelength band, 1460 to 1530. And then they've got C band, conventional band. I'm not sure how they got conventional and original.
That sounds like a step back.
It does kind of sound like that, doesn't it? 1530 to 1565, so not very wide. And as I said a moment ago, the C band is typically what's used. So that's only a fairly narrow band. L band, long wavelength band, 1565 to 1625. And then the U band, ultra long wavelength band, 1625 to 1675. So the researchers have basically been able to use a couple of additional bands on existing cabling, and that's where you get those extra speeds out of it. So what's this mean for us today? Absolutely nothing. But in the near future, with all the fibre optic cabling that's already been run, and we know we have this exponential thirst for data, we're using more and more data, we know we're going to need more data. What this does is allows us as a community to say, well, we need to replace infrastructure at each end, in other words, to take advantage of this, but the cable that's in the ground, which is a lot of expense in rerunning that cabling, that can be left as it is.
Good.
Yeah, that's right. So it is, to me, a really good sign that we continue to develop, we continue to come up with ideas, continue to be ingenious in what we do. And I say we very loosely here, I'm including us.
Yeah, no, it's us. It's us too.
Right, in the researchers, all this we across the world. But it is fantastic to see that. And this basically will allow us to keep upgrading our internet speeds without huge costs going forward.
And we're one step closer to teleportation.
Hopefully, surely we're going to get there soon, surely.
Here's one for the country drivers out there. How frustrating is it when you're zipping freely along the highway just on dusk and that infernal roo bounds out of nowhere for a perfectly timed rendezvous with the front of your car at 100 k's an hour? Now, when I say out of nowhere, we all know what I mean, and that is that thing sprang from the depths of Hades with the simple mission to cost you thousands in repairs, and then it's going to bound off into the wilderness. It looks like Bentley may have a promising solution, though, Matt.
It does have a promising solution, and we see it on movies all the time where someone's going to go and raid something at night time, so they put their thermal imaging goggles on, and away they go, and they have perfect vision. It sounds
Predator.
Fantastic.
Yeah, there we go.
Well, there you go.
That movie.
One of many examples.
Was that 80s or 90s, anyway?
Yeah, probably a long time ago.
But thermal imaging.
Thermal imaging, all the go. So why not introduce that in vehicles? So the only minor problem here is the only car that's got this at the moment is the 2024 Continental GT from Bentley, which is about $350,000 US. So probably not going to be taking over the roads yet. But I'm okay when development happens at Formula One level or at high-end vehicle level. We know it doesn't take that long before it becomes commonplace in vehicles.
Yeah,
that's right. So they've got a night vision camera fitted to the grille. It's got a 24-degree field of view. And what it will do is it looks for thermal images. So exactly as you mentioned there with the kangaroo, at nighttime or at dusk when you've got your headlights and you can see what your headlights can see, but humans, we're not that good. We can only see visible light.
Yeah.
Using thermal imaging, they can see other light. Now, it's obviously displayed in the car. There's a 12.3-inch panel that it displays on, so a bit smaller than, say, in a Tesla, but still reasonable size. And I watched some videos of it in action and driving along, At night time, I could see pedestrians, I could see joggers, I could see cyclists, and they were pretty clear in the view.
Yeah, right. So, that's got to be a big benefit, for those. I talked about roos, and, if you're in the Northern Hemisphere, mooses and whatnot.
Yep.
But, for cyclists and pedestrians.
That's right. And especially, I ride a bike, and I ride a bike typically early in the morning because it's a convenient time to do it, but I'm always conscious I've got lots of lights and radar and all sorts of things in my bike to try and make sure I don't become a victim to a car. But I think this is one of those things where definitely we'll see this start to be integrated into more and more cars as we go forward. Obviously, it can pick up anything that's got a heat signature, and that always works better when you've got a differential in temperature. So at night time, when it's cooler, you see someone like a human that might be, especially a jogger, might be running along, putting out 35, 40 degrees Celsius from their body. That might be really convenient for them to be picked up by that. But it might be a bit tougher if you're in a very warm climate and you see something else that's got a similar warmth to the surrounding air. But I still think it'd pick it up okay.
So snakes and lizards, they're still at risk.
Probably snakes, which I'm not overly concerned that a snake's going to come out.
Tortoises
and cause
that are
damage.
trying to cross the road very slowly.
Yeah, that's right. So you've still got a few risk factors there, but if it saves some pedestrians, saves some cyclists, and that's obviously a pretty good start for it all. The only thing that worries me a little bit, and certainly when I was looking at this, some research on this was brought up as a concern, is that you tend to get to the point now where there are so many things happening in your car, you almost lose track of what alert, what noise, what thing
you've got to look out the
at.
windscreen, at the window.
And that's right. It's almost, I've got to look forward as well. But you do, you're starting to drive along and you get a beep go off or you get a warning go off. You start to reverse out, the steering wheel will vibrate, you drift off the lane, you might get pushed back over. Yeah. There's all these different things. You want to be able to look out the front window, obviously. How much time are you actually going to look out the thermal imaging screen versus the front window when you're driving at night time. So it's a whole range of things going on in the cabin, and that's been highlighted because we've only got one set of eyes and we tend to only look in one place at a time. So it's hard to take all of this in.
Well, I wonder if AI is going to kick in here and tell us what's worth paying attention to and what's not.
It probably would get to the point where you'd be highlighting, there'd be some sort of highlight, some sort of warning. You've got to learn what all the warnings mean too, James. There's different noises that go off. And sometimes
different noises, different visually. And there's a little bit of panic. Go, what's that one? And yeah.
That's right. So there's nothing worse than one of the kids in the back seat playing on a Nintendo and there's a noise goes off and you go, what was that in the car? What's going wrong? And the kids in the back going, oh no, that was just me. So you do hear all these noises.
There were no warning signs and signals in a 75 Falcon.
Well, that's true too. And there's no Nintendo in the back seat either. It was Spotto or something, wasn't it? Yeah. So it's quite fascinating though to see that we continue to evolve in this area and continue to make our cars safer. But certainly I like the idea of a thermal imaging camera and then throw a bit of AI into the mix somewhere down the track.
Yeah. The humble paper plane. While some people just don't get it, for others it's a form of fine art. A type of origami where perfection is measured in sweet, clean airtime. In my time as a science teacher, I've come across adults and children alike who compete for sheep stations in paper plane competitions. Their trusted design is a mark of honour. But all that is about to come tumbling down. Matt, now that robots have been allowed to sit at the table.
I know you're a paper plane fan, and I know you love your paper plane folding and trying to outdo someone else. So
my intro came from the heart this time.
Exactly, and I wasn't sure if you'd like this story or not.
No,
but there's been a new robot created called Paperbot. And it was created by some people at the Columbia University in New York. And what they're doing is they're doing exactly what you and I would do when we're making a paper plane, but they're doing it more accurately. So you and I would get there and we'd fold a paper plane and we'd go, right, I've got this competition against my good friend. I'll throw that one and see, not too bad. I'll try another one. Oh, right. Oh, yeah.
In aerodynamics, millimetres count.
And they do. And also the problem we
fractions of a degree, yep.
The problem we have when we're doing exactly that is every time we test our plane, it'd be nice to throw it exactly the same angle with exactly the same force.
It's all about where you're holding it and
That's
how
right.
the folds are creased.
But as humans, we're not that good at replicating perfectly what we do. So Paperbot is going away from the idea of computer simulation to design a paper plane. So they're not cheating in that respect. But what Paperbot does is has the basic instructions to fold a plane, folds the plane, then launches at the optimal launch angle and at the same force every single time. Does the launch, measures where it lands. Okay, I got 7 metres with that one. Fold another one. Make a subtle change. Millimetres we're talking about. Now, the launch and the power are identical each time. Given the fact that they're probably doing it indoors, so not a lot of outdoor wind to contend with here, you're probably going to get a fairly accurate fly each time to see which design is better. What they did was they tried some testing. They got some paper plane enthusiasts. I don't know why we didn't get the phone call, James.
Yes.
They got some paper plane enthusiasts, and they said, you've got 3 hours to sit down and do some simulations, do some different folds, collaborate, throw some ideas together, and come up with the best plane you can. Paperbot did the same thing, had 3 hours to fold and throw, fold and throw. Over the 3 hour time frame, Paperbot managed to do 100 different designs, and no surprises here, but it's going to hurt. You know that Paperbot outperformed the humans, significantly outperformed the humans.
I've never been so disappointed in one of your stories. We've done a lot of stories over 4 years, Matt, and I've never been so disappointed in a story.
I know, but let's look at the good side here. I know we've talked before about some material science where a similar concept has occurred where forget about doing computer modelling because sometimes strange things happen. So put different components together and then test. So in other words, you might be testing for tensile strength.
Yep.
Put those components together, test, okay, you got so much strength out of that. Change the mixture slightly, change what you do slightly, test again. That's where robots can be really effective. And suddenly you get a compound or an alloy you might get that you wouldn't have even thought about as a human, but because it's just doing trial and error, it's putting together combinations.
Completely objectively.
Exactly right. Just saying, I'm going to put this in, I'm going to put this in. And someone might say, well, that's stupid. Why would you put that together? But it doesn't think that. It just puts it together.
So the trouble with having a human brain is we tend to get, when we try to be objective, we often fall into the subjective and we get distracted and go down a line.
And I know when I used to do training for some of my technicians in a computer business I had many years ago, one of the things I used to talk to them about in troubleshooting was I'd say, do the quick things first. And so there'd be a problem they might be having. I'd say, this example here, test that first. And of course, the young technician would say, well, that's not the problem. I say, well, it's probably not the problem, but do that first because wouldn't it be painful if you went and did all the long time-consuming things and you came back and went, oh, that was a problem. I should have checked that first. Yeah. But trying to get someone to think that way, to test something that you definitely know is not the answer, but 1 in 100 times it is. Gee, I'm glad I tested that way first. Yeah. Same sort of thing when you're mixing these different alloys. As a human, you might just go, no, I'm going to dismiss that. I'm not going to waste my time on that one. It'd be a bit like your lotto, filling in your lotto and saying, well, I'm not going to put in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 for my lotto numbers because that'd be silly. Well, it's just got the same chance as putting in 8, 10, 15, 17, 32, 16 and 38. So it's exactly the same statistics in terms of the chance of it, but it just looks wrong. So as a human, you might dismiss it. So this is the concept. So they've tried some other things, not just paper planes. So they weren't trying to win every paper plane competition around the world. They also tried using kirigami techniques, which is a form of origami, and do some paper-based folding for a robotic gripper. And by doing that, they managed to achieve a much greater strength out of the folding they did rather than just what the traditional kirigami would have said to do. So taking some traditional paper making, taking some fun things with paper planes, but then applying it from a robotic perspective. The big picture here is obviously looking at how you do machine learning, how you get robotics to just keep trying experiments and then seeing what develops from that. So quite fascinating. But I wish they would have picked something besides paper.
Yeah, it was a good story, but I'm still unhappy.
Good. Sorry about that.
Medical implants that need power. Now, there's a dilemma. What do you do when the battery's running low? Changing the battery in your watch used to be bad enough, but surgery to change a pacemaker, that's next level. Well, those days may soon be over with a new battery that recharges with every breath, Matt.
It is fascinating. Well, the first part's fascinating as well. What you said is spot on. With things like pacemakers, you get a flat battery, then you go and have surgery.
You have to unzip and then replace and then re-zip.
Maybe they need to do that, just put a zipper in because that sounds easier. But that's a problem for people. And then they've started to come up with the concept of having some form of rechargeable battery that can recharge like a watch or a phone where it's wireless charging. So you put something against your skin in a certain spot and do some recharging there. But that's all a bit clumsy because you've got to sit there still with it on you. They've experimented with that. This concept, though, is quite fascinating where they probably won't get forever life out of it, but they're talking about maybe getting years of life out of batteries or out of the concept without needing to recharge. And what they do is they use a sodium-based alloy and a porous gold. They exploit sodium's reaction with oxygen and then take advantage of the fact that we've got oxygen running through our blood vessels. So they're using that reaction to produce a current. Now, you get some byproducts from any chemical reaction. There's going to be some byproducts. You get some sodium ions and some hydroxide ions, but they're not dangerous for the body. They're produced in such small quantities, they're just absorbed by the body, so that's okay. The biggest problem they're having at the moment is just getting a stable voltage out of this because the oxygen's flowing through at different rates.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Yeah, so that's a part of the problem. But they've done some tests on rats, for example, good old rats making their contribution to humans again. And what they did was they put these particular little parts in, they left them there. They couldn't get it to stabilise for the first 2 weeks, but after about 2 weeks, it started to stabilise and they got a consistent 1.4 volts out of it, which is not enough to drive some of the equipment we need to drive, but it's early stages in this, obviously. So
And just clever to think of. You know, like just,
Isn't it? Isn't it? That's what I thought too. Now, you have got a sodium electrode in this, so that will eventually deplete. So essentially, that's what you'd have to replace, but you'll get much longer out of it because it's not being a battery that's charged up and then depleting. It's actually generating power as you go, but it is using up some of that electrode as the process goes on. But at the moment, again, in rats, that's all we've got it. The idea is to keep working on getting a stable voltage and also to increase that life of it. So rather than a few years, you might get 5 years, you might get 10 years out of it, but basically getting to that point where you can put it in and say, there you go, sir, you're right, come back and see me in 5 years, and things might need to be replaced at that point in time, but a lot better than we've got now with pacemakers, for example. But it is quite fascinating, and there is this whole concept that researchers are working on where they're using some of the body's natural processes. In this case, we've got oxygen in our blood veins, blood vessels, and then different types of biomedical engineering.
Yeah, so I wonder if they stick with the oxygen idea or if this is just the seed that I've thought where they go, oh, there are some other anions in the body that we could be using as well.
And that's based on chemical reactions. Then I started thinking, when I read this story, I started thinking about maybe some sort of impeller as blood vessels are moving blood through them, maybe spinning an impeller, but I thought there probably wouldn't be enough spinning our blood vessels. There's not enough blood moving fast enough to actually produce much voltage out of that.
Yeah, but that guy said that you could only get 33.6 kilobits. Yeah, so it's just a hold on there. Right.
But this is the thing, people are thinking of these ideas. And I was at a conference the other day and I was speaking at a conference and I said the idea about ideas aren't owned by someone. You come up with an idea and someone else develops something. Oh, that was my idea. Well, no, you didn't really own the idea. It's all about the execution. So there might be lots of people out there that have thought about this, but the researchers, and this is at the University of Technology in China that have come up with this concept, but researchers have to actually come to the point where they put the concept into real terms rather than go, I had an idea on the toilet the other day. Well, that didn't really help society. Actually getting to the stage where we implement that idea. So I'm sure there's other ideas out there as well.
Some things just die hard, and that can certainly be said about vinyl LPs. Now, we were supposed to have farewelled them with the onset of CD technology. But the crackle and the hiss as the needle hits the plastic is a lure that cannot be shaken. Indeed, vinyl combined with a face-melting 42-inch subwoofer is how classics like Zeppelin and Hendrix were always supposed to be heard. CDs were a passing fad, Matt, but it appears vinyl is here to stay.
I'm going to say a sentence that's got two problems from my perspective. Vinyl records outsold CDs in the US last year. Now, I've got two problems with that. What are we doing buying vinyl and what are we doing buying CDs?
Yeah, who's still buying CDs? And the answer is, and it came from one of my colleagues who was telling me she was able to locate a CD of her favourite performer that she could play in her car stereo. And I thought to myself, my first thought was, you're still playing CDs.
You've still got a car stereo? That's right. So the numbers are incredibly scary. In 2023, 43 million vinyl records were sold in the US alone. 37 million CDs were sold in the US alone. What are people doing? Now, I do blame Taylor Swift for some of this. Taylor Swift actually released some of her songs, some of her music on vinyl. And so Taylor Swift fans, and there seem to be a few of those out there, they will buy anything that Taylor Swift releases. So if she releases songs on vinyl, they're going to be bought. So I blame Taylor for some of those. I don't know how many of those 43 million were Taylor Swift, maybe 42.9 million. No, it wasn't that many, but that's one part of it. But people do still love that sound, and I'm not an audiophile.
Sorry. When you've heard Led Zeppelin played on one of those old school hi-fis with a really powerful set of speakers, it's awesome.
So you would, I'm actually after
Jimi Hendrix the same, yeah.
I'm after the convenience.
Jimmy Page, like it's just, it's something.
I want to just stream my music, download it for convenience factor, and I'm not.
I get that too.
I'm not a good enough audiophile that I could say, if you sat me in a room and said, tell me which one's vinyl, which one's a streaming song, I reckon the only way I could tell the difference is because of the crackle and hiss.
The crackle and hiss, there's an expectation of what's about to come.
True.
Yeah, it's
true.
a little intro, and
Yep.
you go, oh, okay. I'm sorry. I'm now probably going a little bit too deep into this.
Well, I used to nickname some of my records when I was a kid growing up as rice bubbles because they had snap, crackle, and pop
Yeah,
throughout them.
yeah,
So they were terrible. And obviously the problem here is that you've got this needle sitting in a bit of plastic, spinning around in circles, and that eventually wears it out. So you do get the record where it sounds terrible.
It's that mechanical damage.
It is, and you even get to the stage where you've got the old belt, the rubber belt, they stretch sometimes, and so it actually slows down how fast your record is playing. We had a drummer from the Reels who was friends of one of my big brothers, and he walked into our lounge room one day, and he said, you need to replace that belt. And we were going, what do you mean? Well, that belt, that stretch, that's not the right beat for that song. It wasn't a real song, it was just a song, and he was obviously so much into his music, he'd picked that up, and you sure? And anyway, my sister took that down to the local repair store and they said, oh, yep, you'll definitely need to replace that belt.
When they used to repair stuff.
Repair stuff, that's right. Yeah. So obviously there are all these problems with vinyl, but people are still buying them. I don't know how you go with a vinyl record player in your car. The CD player is one thing, but and they're a bit harder to put on your hip while you go for a run.
Hitting those potholes takes its toll.
Yeah, so I'm fascinated by this, and this is the second year in a row, believe it or not, that vinyl has outsold CDs. So it just seems fascinating. And I don't know who's
coming back, Matt.
Producing CDs. Look, and I get the vinyl, the raw sound that you might get from vinyl, but then why are people buying CD? Because CDs are in a digital format, so surely
everything should be outselling CDs at this stage.
That's right, because you're streaming. Surely the digital format of that is going to be the same quality as a CD.
Yeah.
And surely you can find I love that actually, when you're driving in the car and you say to the kids, oh, this is this old Led Zeppelin song. And they go, what are you talking about, old man? So you just say to your streaming app, I want to just play this song, and it finds it, it plays it, rather than going, wait till we get home, I'll go and search through the records.
Look, when I hear Dire Straits' Brothers in Arms on CD, I'm listening for the crackle and hiss, and it's not there. So that was one of the first. That was one of the first LPs that we got.
Yeah, right.
And, sorry, I can't say that. Rock and roll LPs, I've got to say.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Well, it's been a long time. Vinyl was the primary music source till 1987. That's when CDs came along and started to take over the world, and everyone went, wow, this is fantastic. You mean they don't wear out? You mean it doesn't skip like a vinyl record does? So anyway, I'm fascinated by this. I'll report again next year to see if 2024 holds more of the same, and I'm somewhat suspecting it will.
For an all too brief moment in time, people like myself consoled each other in the light of the thought that the AI storm was going to pass on. At least AI couldn't make value judgments or offer opinions. And it was only a matter of time. Take care, folks. AI has now learned the power of persuasion and will probably burn you in a debate. Choose your topic carefully. Matt, anything we can do, AI can do better.
Oh, it's seeming like that, isn't it? And I actually did do a little April Fool's Day joke where I said that on a council, it'd be good to have an additional counsellor as an AI counsellor. So have your normal human counsellors and just add one AI counsellor. And some of it was based around this idea of this story where an AI counsellor would be really good in a debate. It would take all the human emotion out of it, all the pleadings about people saying, oh, I don't like it next door to me, all the things that seem a bit illogical, and just look at the raw data, deal with the facts, and say, this is how it is. And so in this particular experiment, they got 820 volunteers. And they divided them into two groups, and they said, they didn't tell them which one, but they took half of them and they said, we're going to debate topics and you're going to debate against a human. And the other half, they said, you're going to debate against an AI. So they put together some questions, they put together some debating topics and just some random things that were not necessarily things that were their areas of expertise. So, for example, should we keep using, and this is in America, keep using pennies in our currency? I mean, 1 cent, we got rid of 1 cent coins a long time ago, so pennies in America, should we get rid of those? And what are the arguments for and against those, and debate that? Or what about animal testing? Is animal testing a good thing for humans, and what's the debate around that? So they put together that, and then they said, off you go, have your debate and see how you go. At the end of it all, the participants were given a questionnaire and said, how do you think you went in your debate, and are you more likely to agree with your opponent? Well, the humans who debated against an AI said they were 81.7%. They were weak. That's right. They didn't know they were debating against an AI. Well, they weren't told. They might have worked it out.
Okay.
But they, at the end of it all, when they were asked, 81.7% said they're likely to shift towards what the AI was saying. So pretty much an effective debating tool. When they were asked the same question and they happened to be against the human cohort, it was about 50-50. So would you shift to the view of the opponent? And it was 50-50 yes or no. So basically, as you'd expect, I think half the debate yes, half the debate no. But if you were debating against AI, then it was 81.7%. Now, I used to do a bit of debating back at school, and one of the things that used to always be top of mind would be making sure you've got data, research, information in the back of your mind about the topic you're debating, so that you could present that in your debate. But also, if the opponent put up stuff that was wrong, you could basically say, well, that bit of information is wrong. That's a slight advantage AI has. It has access to all information. So if you say...
But including the wrong stuff too, right?
Well, hopefully it's clever enough to weed that out. But when in that debate, in that argument, if you say, well, 22% of people do this, or we've got data that shows that, well, the AI tool, you can't bluff it. You can't get away with saying, I think this will sound good, I'll just say it and see if I can get away with it, which I'm not saying that ever happened in debates that I did, but maybe it could happen.
Yeah.
But it's quite fascinating, and it's just using the data, it's using the information and coming up with the arguments based on that. So it's quite fascinating. So my April Fool's Day joke mightn't have been such a silly one after all. Maybe having an AI tool as part of government, as part of a formal debate, mightn't be such a bad idea to see what happens when you take the emotion out of something. So pretty scary.
Yeah. And to take that story from a level of mild eyebrow-raising interest to the level of a Scooby-Doo, I'm out of here, get the hell out of my way, yikes, that sort of panic, hot off the press is the headline that AI is now getting into mind reading. That's right, folks. Someone out there is teaching it how to predict brain function. Matt, I don't want to be an alarmist, but we've all seen how this movie ends, right?
That's right, and not good for us. Although you and I, we keep saying, we like AI, look after us.
Yes, we love our AI overlords.
That's right. So everyone else, that might end badly. But we talked about the neural network concept, the Neuralink, where you basically have something implanted in your brain. So there's one person in our world that's got that at the moment. This is taking a slightly different approach. These are some researchers from Kobe University, and they've been working on mice at this stage, poor old animals thrown in the mix again, where just by looking at brain imaging data, so basically taking images of the brain, which we've all seen pictures, maybe some people had brain images taken or they've seen pictures on movies, you see the brain image, you see different colours for what's happening in there. Mm-hmm. Just by looking at those images, at the moment they've been working on, is the mouse moving or is the mouse still? So what's actually happening? They've been able to get 95% accuracy by looking at brain images. So essentially someone's sitting there saying, by looking at what's happening on the brain, I can predict whether the mouse is moving or stopped. Now,
which is really clever, but it's still far from mind reading.
Far from mind reading, I know.
But we're one step closer, folks. That's the good news.
Intro build it up. Never let the intro get in the way of the real data. But it's a step in the right direction in terms of seeing what's happening and seeing the changes that occur. And that's what we're really talking about here. Now, keep in mind that the brain of a mouse is pretty small. So you're looking for some pretty subtle changes there to look whether a mouse is moving or a mouse is still. But it obviously goes further when you get more accurate imaging and then you take a bigger brain, say, a human, for example, then you would get some subtle changes there depending on what was happening. Now, mind reading, wow, that's a a long way away for me to be thinking at the moment, gee, I like the cap that James is wearing.
I just know that we're not a long way away. I just get this sick feeling that we're not very far away. But anyway, keep going.
And
sorry.
you may be right. But this is talking about non-invasive, and that's, I think, the real difference here, the difference from Neuralink, for example, non-invasive. Look at that image of the brain. How does it change? And then getting enough data, and this is where AI becomes the critical tool, getting enough data of what are you thinking about now? Oh, what's the picture of your brain look like? What are you thinking about now? What's the picture of your brain? Oh, you're walking now. What's the picture of your brain look like? You're driving a car. What's the picture of your brain look like? Getting enough of that data, then you can start to get to the stage where you can predict by looking at that brain image data exactly what that person is doing and then eventually thinking. But I still wonder. So I'm looking at your cap now and I go, I like that cap that James is wearing, or I don't like that cap that James is wearing. Is there a difference in my brain imaging from those two thought processes when I see you walk in and I see the cap that you're wearing? Wow, that's got to be some pretty subtle changes in my brain image.
Will it be about attaching emotion to a thought? Wouldn't it?
It probably would be, yeah.
Really,
and then attaching it to the brain, to the hat that you're wearing as attached to that emotion. So maybe we're few more months away from actually reading minds.
A couple of months, weeks.
Right. But
weeks.
But it's in the right direction or the wrong direction.
Are you one to keep a journal? They say it's a wonderful way to promote well-being, to unpack the day that was and just leave it on the page. An excellent way to manage your state of mind during the end of days, perhaps. Well, Apple are onto this, and they have developed a new app to encourage people to take a little time for this simple but worthwhile task. Matt, a digital diary, not a bad idea, but how is this one more user-friendly than a piece of paper and a pen?
Well, my mum was an absolute diary fanatic, and it was fantastic when I'd say, oh, Mum, a couple of years ago at school something happened. Oh, what year do you think it was, Matt? Oh, 1983. I'll go and get the diary out for that year. And when was it approximately? And she'd search through it, and every day there was, I reckon, the diary was broken up into kind of 3 pages, 3 days per page.
Yeah, right.
I reckon half of that was taken up with diary notes every day. So just fascinating. And looking at it when Mum died, we went back and looked at some of those, and just reading some of those bits and pieces was fascinating. So it's pretty dedicated, though. You've got to be really keen to sit down at the end of the day and start to write down those things. And you might really want to do it, but life gets in the way and you don't end up doing it.
We live such full lives and our heads just get so full these days, and I often think I probably just need to just unload some of this.
It'd be fascinating. I actually find it fascinating sometimes when you're searching back through emails because I know I did this thing on this. I'll go and search for that, and other emails pop up and you go, oh, that's right, I remember that one. Oh, that's interesting. So that's all fascinating. But what they've done in the latest iOS update from Apple, iOS 17.2 that's released in, is they've basically got a new journaling feature. And to help us out, to make it easier for us, at the end of the day, it'll give us a little prompt with some photos or some location data, maybe some call logs. So just a bit of a prompter. And so then as part of your journal, you can make a few notes. And what they've found looking at it so far is that the people writing some notes there are doing it more like a social media post where it's just a quick snapshot, a quick summary, not details like my mum used to do, but here's a photo. I was at the whatever it was today, went and did that today. Or call logs, ring James today, haven't spoken to him in a few weeks, good to catch up. Just some little notes like that. The idea is you look at it in a year, 2 years' time, it's a bit of a prompter. Oh, I remember that day I rang James. Oh, that was a great conversation we had. So it's that type of thing, but having all these little prompts there to help you out, because sometimes you get to the end of the day and you do forget what you've done, and then you look at a photo, oh, that's right, this morning I was out with the kids, taking the dog for a walk.
And this thing dies. As soon as it feels like a chore, it dies. You stop doing it.
Correct. That's exactly right. If someone said, I want you to journal every day, here's a bit of paper, go and do it, you wouldn't do it, or here's a tool on your computer, go and do it. But when it prompts and you look at it, oh, that's right, I'll make a note about that, and you save that in there, the idea is be able to go back and look at it. They do talk about, some of the experts talk about the fact that it does help with your mental health, just to basically relax, calm down, and just think about your day just for a minute, just for a couple of minutes. And that's where Apple's coming from this journal feature. I mean, Apple, where they're really coming from is they want you so linked into the Apple ecosystem that you wouldn't even think about going to an Android phone. That's the real bottom line here, as much as Apple would like to say we're looking after your mental health. But it's actually quite interesting. It probably becomes more a bit of a digital scrapbook more so than a full journal feature because it is showing you these various pictures and things you did during the day. But if you write a few notes there, I think it's not a bad tool to look at. And even when you see on whatever phone you use, sometimes there'll be some reminders come up that say, 3 months ago you're doing this, or a year ago, an anniversary, a year ago, this is what you're doing. Some of those are actually quite nice just to reflect back on.
That's right.
And you forget about all the stuff you've done. You do so much stuff in a day. You forget about, on a day-to-day basis, forget about year-to-year basis, or maybe that's just me getting old, James.
But yeah, a picture tells 1,000 words, and it's lovely to get those little reminders on your phone. But to have a little bit more detail about what that day was about. Yeah,
that's right. And even the imperfect memory that we have, that's the big problem that we have, is that we can remember the story, if you like, but the detail, you go to the accurate detail of what happened. You have 3 people at the same event and say, what colour jumper was James wearing? And they'll all either not know or have different colours they'll come up with. So it's hard for us to get the detail right. That's where computers are really good.
Remembering the memory.
Correct.
And then remembering the memory of the memory.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
So it gets distorted like a Chinese whisper each time.
Well, when someone says, I remember when I was 5 years of age and this happened, you don't really remember what happened at 5 years of age.
Yeah.
At 6, you might have remembered at 5, and then at 7, you remember at 6, and as you said, you're remembering all those memories, and they get slowly twisted
Well, I'm now
away.
consoling myself with those memories that you find really embarrassing, those really embarrassing moments where you wish you hadn't done this or that. I'm now thinking, I'm probably remembering it completely wrong.
Yeah, that's right.
How I'm now addressing those.
Change the narrative.
I definitely wouldn't have done it that.
No, that's right. Change the narrative completely.
There is no shortage of influencers on social media these days. It seems the only qualification that's required to call this a career is an overinflated notion that people want to see you flounce about and recommend things based on little or no real understanding. Folks, this is the result of a world where every child wins a prize. We've got to do something about that. Small wonder that young Americans are dropping these superficial Western platforms and flocking to a new Chinese go-to platform for some straight-up honesty. Matt, firstly, your skin needs some jojoba urgently, I've got to say. This light is so unforgiving. And secondly, is this the beginning of a social revolution?
It could be. The first thing we've got to do, though,
is work out. Jojoba.
Thank you. I'll go and do that. I'll be back in a minute.
I think that's what you do with it.
Oh, who knows? I'll try that and see what happens, and I'll get some more honest opinion from you. But the pronunciation, how are you going with the pronunciation of this particular social media site?
Yeah, not.
I'll give you the spelling, Xiaohongshu, and I'll have a go first if you like. X has often become Z sounding from China, so I'm going to say like Zhongshu.
Ah, you really shortened it. I thought it was, sorry, when I read it before, and I don't have the word in front of me right now, but Xiaohongshu, I saw.
Oh, that sounds good too.
But no, but has that got too many syllables now?
No, because it's got the H in the middle there. So, and I still reckon that X becomes a bit of a Z sound. So Xiaohongshu, make it faster, Xiaohongshu. How's that?
Chinese people, please
don't take offence.
Dial in with the phonetics.
That's right. So it is fascinating, though. You do see so many social media sites where the world is wonderful. They'll post things and it's the most wonderful day. It's the best thing ever they've just done. It
involves someone dancing by infinity pool.
That's right.
And dousing themselves in jojoba.
I absolutely agree with you. I did a Dancing with the Stars event recently and I wasn't very good. I was overseas when the training was meant to be happening and I did very limited training and I'm not very talented and I'm old. So I did along to help with a fundraiser, but I got a trophy.
Hey!
The winners deserve their trophies.
That's right.
I didn't deserve mine, but I got a trophy still. So that's the.
Did all the other people get a trophy?
Everyone got a trophy.
Ah, right. Okay. So the next step is to become an influencer.
That's right. Obviously, I've got a trophy now. Look at me. I'm a star dancer.
People want to know about how you dance.
That's right. So we do have this thing where everything's wonderful, everything's beautiful, and you then don't get honest advice. The only time you get honest advice is when it's very critical and people are happy to dump on you like a ton of bricks. So you get the extremes. You get everything's wonderful, the world's beautiful.
All or nothing.
That's right. So where Xiaohongshu comes in is they're really focused on giving honest, direct and constructive advice. So people post things and they say, I don't want you to be polite. I want you to be honest. Do I need some skincare? Do I look good in this dress? What do I need to improve? What do I need to change? Hey, here's my dance. Can you tell me where I should improve it? Whatever it might be. I should have discovered this site a few days before my
What
dancing with
crystals
the
and
stars.
essential oils should I be using for this?
Exactly right.
Yeah.
So it all started back in 2013 in Shanghai with a travel shopping guide where they tried to make sure that they were giving direct and honest advice about some travel shopping. And then it's kind of developed where they realised that they're onto something, and they realised that maybe people do actually want helpful, constructive advice. You say to your friend, here's a new whatever I've got, what do you think? And if they say, that's pretty good, you kind of go, no, I want you to tell me really, is it actually any good? If it's not, I'm still going to be a friend, but just tell me, I want your honest advice. So this is where this is coming from, because the world has become so superficial, and again, influences and airbrushing. When the royalty in England starts airbrushing, you know that the world has been taken over by airbrushes. So you need a supportive community around this, though, because obviously part of the issue is that people might get the honest, constructive advice, and they mightn't love the idea of this because their whole world has been superficial up till now. So you probably need a bit of support around you before you go and play with this site and see whether it's for you. But the numbers are talking. It's got 300 million users at this stage. Some of the various hashtags associated with this are getting 500 million views. So people are jumping onto it. People are liking what it's got to say. Now, again, 300 million in China maybe isn't that many because you've got 1.4 billion people, but it's 300 million across the world, which still isn't too bad for a social media site. It's not the 3+ billion that Facebook's got, but it's...
I wonder if there'll be other copycat sites that sort of or do something very similar.
Yeah, and look, I think the real fine line here is there's not racism on this site, there's not body shaming on there, but there's honest advice. So there's a fine line. Body shaming and saying maybe you could lose a couple of kilos, there's a fine line there. Maybe if you're healthy, you could lose a couple of kilos rather than body shaming or fat shaming someone. You know, there are fine lines there, but this is where this tries to tread along those fine lines.
And on that note, and on this note, as they dim the lights and draw the curtain, it's time to pack up our technological songbooks and vacate the stage sans encore, just for 1 week at least. Thanks for another cracking tech talk, Matt.
Well, I'm going to hang around a bit because I've got some paper planes to make. If the robotic Paperbot took 3 hours, I'm going to spend another 3 hours just flying planes here and see if I can get something better.
Well, I'm going to join you. AI seems to be rapidly invading that space that we once called humanity. At least in the paper plane arena, I refuse to capitulate to the machines, should I say. I say bring it on, RTDT. Give me your best. Loser has to sit in the corner with the pot plant and be an office printer. Thanks for tuning in again, folks. Tech Talk is designed and built by skilled Swedish craftsmen with the unique fragrance of Scandinavian alpine woodland and just a hint of silicon lubricant, so you know it's good. I'm James Eddy, and as always, it's an absolute pleasure to bring you today's episode. We will deliver again in 1 week's time. We look forward to your company then. Bye for now.